WQAD News 8, this is WQAD This Week.
Good morning. It's Sunday, March 5th. Thank you for joining us for News 8 This Week. I'm John Diaz. Later this week, voters in several school districts will be voting on whether or not to fund renovations for their schools. One of those districts is Bettendorf. Voters will effectively decide whether or not to raise their property taxes by nearly 25%, and there are, as you might imagine, some mixed opinions. This morning, we're sitting down with Bettendorf Community Schools Superintendent Dr. Michelle Morse and Kurt Pratt, Director of Operations for the district, to hear why they're asking for your vote. Dr. Morse, Kurt, thank you so much for taking the time this week to chat with us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having us.
Election Day, just 2 days away now. Can you talk to us a little bit about what voters will be voting on?
Yes, on Tuesday, our voters will be helping us decide if we will pass a bond that will generate about $69.2 million so that we can do needed renovations, updates, modernizations to our Bettendorf Middle School and Bettendorf High School.
And we'll talk about those renovations here in just a second, but help voters understand what is the mechanism for this. Talk about that bond and really the financial impact to voters potentially.
Okay. Yes, with this bond, if it were to pass, that does equate to an increase in their tax levy. When you look at that, that could generate anywhere from an increase of around $16 a month to potentially $30, $40, or $50 a month, just depending on what your net taxable value of your home is in those calculations. Also, there's other factors to that. As we've seen in our community, home values have steadily risen higher than the state has seen. So on average in our community, it's been about 5%. And so our goal around this $2.70 per $1,000 would be that maybe we wouldn't have to levy the entire amount to generate that $69.2 million, meaning that our homeowners wouldn't have a full $2.70 levied on their taxes.
So it could be less.
Could be less, but it will not be more. That has been a question we've been asked. So the petition language, we cannot exceed what we've asked for, which is $2.70. But there is that possibility it could be less.
Got it. Kurt, why? What are the renovations that you're trying to do?
Sure. So the primary projects for the bond are at Bettendorf Middle School and Bettendorf High School. So starting with the middle school, the original building was built in 1966. It's got smaller classrooms, narrower corridors than what we would find in newer construction seen today. And so part of the project is building a large classroom addition that meets more of today's standards. Then we'll come back and demolish what I call the original core of the building, which was built in 66 and 68. And then after that, then we'll build back whatever necessary spaces are within that, and then various renovations and additions throughout the building. At the high school, we'll be adding a CTE wing to facilitate our health sciences classrooms, our culinary arts programs, welding and machining, advanced manufacturing as we've been calling them. We'll be adding an auxiliary gym and some other athletic spaces, a second wrestling room. And then we'll also be renovating some fine arts spaces to better meet the needs of those programs.
Can you give folks at home a sense of the urgency for this? 1960, a long time ago at this point now. Is this needed now?
Yeah, so that's part of our impetus to do this is because we feel like parts of our middle school really are kind of bursting at the seams and can't wait, if you will. We've got a deteriorating roof. We've actually got a situation where there's not a lot of room between the roof deck and the ceiling, and so ductwork was actually run on past projects over the roof, which is not ideal from a construction or operations standpoint by any means. We felt like the time was right. We'd understand that construction costs are higher than normal, but we're in a situation where it is important to get some approval to move forward.
We were tasked by our board of directors to come up with a 10-year facility master plan. So we enlisted the help of an architect firm by the name of OPN that worked with us to conduct educational assessments as well as physical assessments on all of our buildings in the district. We then went out and solicited volunteers to be on a facility advisory committee. We had about 25 to 30 individuals that served on that committee. They were community members, business owners in our community, retired individuals, both district alum, students, or no, I'm sorry, we didn't have students on that committee, but we had parents and we had staff on that committee. They spent about 3.5 months working through all the data from the different assessments, working with OPN, with Kurt and myself, to develop a 10-year facility master plan that was presented to our board of directors in December. And they had to really sift through all that information and identify the highest priorities over the next 10 years. And that is what came out of the petition language that voters will be voting on Tuesday.
Dr. Morris, can you talk about the impact to students and education moving forward if this passes and you're able to complete these renovations?
Yes, for our students, obviously being able to expand our facilities, update and modernize them means we can continue to provide the high quality education that they're accustomed to, but in spaces that better meet the needs of today. Meaning larger spaces. For example, in the original building that Kurt just talked about, those classrooms are averaging about 700 square feet. In today's standards, you want a classroom to be about 900 square feet, give or take. That's just that couple hundred feet in square footage makes a huge difference in terms of how do we collaborate and learn to work together and problem solve. And so those facilities at the high school, for example, in our choir rooms, we want to make sure they're ADA accessible. So if we have a student that has physical disabilities, currently those rooms are tiered. They're tiered down. So if maybe I'm an alto and that group is in the front of the room, I might not be able to be with my peers. And so in terms of athletics, we know that that is a big reason that families move to our district, as well as they open and roll in, is because of our expansive co-curricular opportunities, from athletics and fine arts to the other clubs. And so having that additional auxiliary space, a second wrestling room, will be able to meet the needs of all the students that want to participate in the different events. And in addition, it becomes a community resource. So if we have those, we have a lot of youth programs that want to use our facilities, and a community that wants to use those. And so by having additional spaces, we can invite more of our community in, and we can also get our student athletes and our student musicians out of the buildings before 9 o'clock. Right now, because of all the different practices, Kurt's given some examples around basketball. We have 7 different basketball teams at the high school. Well, we don't have the space for all of them to practice simultaneously, and that can lead to some finishing practice between 9 and 10 o'clock at night. And so we know that they've got studies and they need to be home and get the right amount of sleep. So we think through this expansion, our students are only going to benefit from updated spaces as well as expanded spaces to meet the needs of everybody.
Obviously, you've spoken with folks in the community. You've heard both sides. There are some concerns. I'd like to play a piece of an interview that we did a couple weeks ago, and I want you to respond to it. So let's play it, and then I'll ask you about it.
Absolutely.
I don't believe that I'm going to be in favor of this. I just think it's a rough time for everybody, and unless I'm missing something, I think we need to hold off a little bit. I don't believe that we're not at pre-pandemic levels anymore. We're not going to be for a few years. And people are having a hard time making ends meet. And to tag $30 a month on to their property bills or whatever, it's not going to help. So I'm all in favor of this. I'm not in favor of it right now. I think the timing's a bit off. I know it's important to our property values, and I know it's important to having a good community. This is the first time I will, at this point, probably be voting no. And it doesn't mean I wouldn't vote yes down the road. But I think we need to get on top of inflation and look at the lives we're living right now and what a struggle it is to pay just general bills, utility and everything. Every time something comes in the mail, it's an increase. And so I think we need to step back and see what we're asking of our community members. But I'm all in favor of improving schools and doing what's best for children. I'm a retired teacher, so I'm all about that.
I can't imagine she's alone in some of the things that she's thinking about and worried about. They seem reasonable. How do you convince someone who maybe feels the way that she feels that this is still important to move forward with?
Absolutely. We don't take this request of our community lightly. We recognize that economically times are tough for people. We've also outlined, as Kurt did just a few minutes ago, the absolute need that we have in our schools to make sure that they continue to be safe and inviting places for students to learn. And so we, over the last 10 years, as we shared with our community during different presentations and forums, our district has done a really good job of being mindful of the levies that we already have and reducing those levies each year. And so we feel like we have a great track record of being very fiscally responsible with those dollars. And as I mentioned earlier, our goal would be not to have to, pull that full $2.70 if we can prevent that. But we want to, and we will commit to making sure we use those dollars efficiently and effectively to minimize that burden on our taxpayers. But as we know, good schools create good communities, and both need. The community needs good schools, and we need good communities. And by investing in our educational infrastructure, we believe that will only further enhance the community and increase property values.
Hard to deny that the need is in place, the need is there. If this doesn't pass, are there things you can think about to move forward with some of the renovations potentially?
As we've discussed, we would go back and work with our board of directors. We obviously work with Kurt and our other team to really identify what are the absolute needs and what reserves do we have through the dollars that we have, and then work from that. We already have a 5-year deferred maintenance plan. Those are things such as carpet repairs or painting or small roof repairs, things like that. So we'd go back, we'd look at what do we have currently that we could use from a reserve standpoint, and it would be bare bones projects if the bond were not to pass.
Understood. All right, Dr. Morris, Kurt Pratt, thanks so much for taking the time this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Of course.